This is our second pen to paper panel of the year, and we have one more tomorrow at 1 p.m, so definitely come and check that out. We're really excited to host this series with Barnes & Noble. We have an amazing collection of filmmakers today, and we have our moderator. I'm going to pass it over. The topic today is putting the eye in film, and it's really about bringing personal experience and personal life into our film itself. So we have some really bold filmmakers, and I'd like to introduce Mark Adams. He's the chief film critic at Screen International. His work has also appeared in Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and Movie Pictures International, and he's also currently film critic for England's Sunday Mirror. So please welcome Mark Adams, and he'll introduce our panelists.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Thanks for coming out on a nice Saturday and taking time out to lunchtime to come hear this conversation. Housekeeping-wise, we're going to talk for a little while, and then there'll be a chance to ask some questions. I think there'll be a mic going in amongst you, so listen carefully, think up some really tough questions to these guys. They're really, really keen to be challenged and to give them a hard time, so I think we'll have some fun. Well, I'm going to run across everybody here. Next to me, we have Tom Berninger, whose film Mistaken for Strangers will be up tonight, film here, and then screens again to the public later this week. Amy Grantham, whose film Lily screens tonight. Still a chance to get tickets, maybe, I'm not too sure, hopefully.
Yeah.
And for other screenings, of course, in the week. And Banker White at the end, whose film is The Genius of Marian, and screens, but it will screening again.
Sunday, Tuesday, Friday.
Great. What I'm going to ask these guys to do, because the films are so different and so different from each other and so distinctive, I think it's interesting for them to talk about their particular films briefly, and then we'll get into the subject itself about putting yourself into the film and what that experience is like. So, Tom, please.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I made the movie Mistaken for Strangers, and it's about my brother and I. He's my older brother by 10 years, and he's in a pretty successful up-and-coming, well, been up-and-coming for a long time, rock band, The National. And we were very close when I was really young, but we kind of grew apart when he went to college and I finished grade school. And so my movie's about him asking me to go on tour with him and, you know, become a roadie and just get some experience, get me out of Cincinnati. And I brought a little camera along, and I filmed whatever I could, trying to make him look cool, trying to make my attempt at making some kind of monkeys thing, or I don't, you know. I mean, I've read a lot about them in the press, and a lot of the press always say they're kind of a somber, dark band, and I just thought, and I knew they kind of had a strange little problem with that because they're all really nice guys. It just happens to be they make kind of grayish area. They don't make super pop songs. They make kind of, I don't know, more emotionally charged gray songs, if that makes any sense. So I wanted to have fun with them and kind of play with their image. And in turn, I kind of got 200 hours of kind of just random stuff that was kind of awful. And my movie is about me coming to terms with kind of a lot of random awful footage and trying to make something good for my brother, and also me being 30 years old at the time. I knew I had to, this was a good opportunity and this is my shot, and I feel like I was slowly becoming a disaster, but through my brother's wife, Corinne, who's also a producer on the movie, she has forced me to keep rolling on myself, keep filming myself, and do little diary entries about how I felt finishing the movie and the editing process. And I put myself in front of the camera throughout the movie. We used almost all of them because at the time I knew I was going to be part of the tour, but I didn't think I was going to be at like the the main focus of the movie, but I knew that if I was going to make a documentary, being a brother might be an interesting aspect, but I had no idea that I was going to be this big and this much of a focus. So that's my story.
Hello. Hi, my name is Amy Grantham, and I co-wrote the film Lily with Matt Creed, and it's the story of a girl who's finishing her treatment for breast cancer, and it's largely based off of my real life, which at the time when I started writing, I was actually finishing the last part of my own cancer treatment. I was going through radiation at the time, and Matt and I thought that it might be interesting to show a film that talks about cancer but isn't necessarily a cancer film in the typical sense of the word. So kind of showing what was the most difficult part for me, which was what happens after you're done with treatment, and how everyone in your world is kind of congratulating you and telling you that this must be such a great time in your life, but really it's a very intense, kind of heavy time, because you had all these people that were in your life, like doctors and other patients, and you see them every day, and then they're just gone, and all of a sudden you're just supposed to be living your life again, and it's a very difficult transition, or at least I thought that it was, and so that's what we wrote the film about, was just kind of seeing how this girl gets back into her life, and touching on what I had told Matt, which was, ironically, that cancer was actually the easiest thing I had ever done, and somehow, that was the first thing in my life that I had completed from beginning to end, and there were so many other things that I felt like I would start to do and I'd lose interest, but when I got cancer, somehow I had a mission, and I finally kind of had a purpose, and so this film was a really nice way to just kind of close that chapter and, hopefully let people know a little bit more what it's like to have breast cancer and to see some of what you actually go through. We have some really great scenes in it where we actually got to use one of the machines that I used to get radiation treatment. So I hope it's informative and raises some questions.
Just to add, you didn't just write it. You're the star of it.
Yes, and I also act in it as well, which was a first for me, but I feel like I kind of jumped right into it, and hopefully it's okay. I don't know.
My name is Banker White, and I directed a documentary called The Genius of MARIAN, which is about my mother's struggle with early onset Alzheimer's. And I filmed over about 3.5 years, and it kind of shows her disease process and what it was like for our family. But it did start in it is an intensely personal documentary in that way, but it started more as this activity that I was doing with my mom. My mom's name, her name is Pam, and MARIAN is actually my grandmother. And about a year before she was diagnosed, she kind of announced to the family that she was going to write a book that tributed her mother, MARIAN, and the title of the book was The Genius of MARIAN. MARIAN had Alzheimer's herself and passed in 2001. And so I just kind of took this activity on as this thing that I was going to do with my mom to help her with this project that, even though it was before her diagnosis, it was pretty clear was not going to be completed, because she retired early. She was in her probably late 50s. She was diagnosed at 61. So the project started in this very personal way, where I would come home and sit with her and we'd look at old photos. And I was incredibly close with MARIAN, who was a painter, and so I helped digitize all the paintings. And then when she was diagnosed, I made the decision that I live in San Francisco, there in Boston, that I would move home and help the family out. And this activity that I was doing with my mom just turned into this film. I've never made a personal film before, and it's been a really special, kind of precious time that I spent with my family, and it brought up a lot. It was healing, and I'm excited to talk about personal filmmaking. I've never done it before. It's super uncomfortable in some ways, and and really healing in others. So.
I think we were talking about earlier, the fact that when the film comes to an end, there's a sense of closure and you've brought something to an end, but then showing it to your families for the first time, that must be the most terrifying part of it. I mean, when you showed it to Marian and you showed it to your brothers and sisters, what was that experience like?
So, with my mom, we looked at things that we did from the very, very beginning, up until the point she started. So my mom was a social worker, and really good at getting people to talk about their own emotions, not very good about talking about her own. And so she wasn't talking with her friends about this diagnosis at all, and that persisted well into the point in her life when everybody knew that she needed help, and in fact that she'd been diagnosed, and it became quite diluted about how much of a secret this was. And yet at the same time, she started using filming with me as this kind of therapy space to talk very openly about what it felt like had been diagnosed with this disease that holds a lot of stigma. But interestingly, when she started doing that, I didn't show her that footage because it just wasn't a part of it. And then when this turned into more of a film, which means, I mean, that's its own kind of funny thing. I had all these other projects. I'd go to industry forums, I'd see people's eyes kind of like glaze over on one of my projects, and they literally, are you working on anything else? And I, at Hot Talks, 2010, I kind of told someone who I knew well personally about this project, and they said, well, that sounds really interesting. And then so, after it became more of a film, I sat down and I showed everybody. And I would say with my dad, who's always been very supportive of me, but we don't dialogue like I did with my mom about life and emotions and things like that. That was probably the most transformative piece for me for working on this film. Because he really, it opened up a space, and this is before it was done, but just kind of showing the footage to start to talk about things. And then, yeah, everyone, they really liked the film, but it doesn't mean that it's comfortable. I was nervous as hell Thursday night this week. Everyone was here, my mom, my dad, my brother. But it went well. You know, like, people come out, and my dad's not like he's a sensitive guy who's not used to being like hugged by strangers. But I think there's so much with a disease that moves really slowly and people don't know how to deal with it. I actually think that kind of emotion, and so far it's been a couple days, has been really good for everybody.
And Amy, for you, what was the experience like? Because I mean, you co-wrote the script as well, so was there a sense that you had boundaries when you were writing the script? Were there lines you didn't want to go over? Did you?
Not so much really, because as it happens, before we wrote this, when I got diagnosed, I started a blog, which very openly chronicled everything that happened when I had cancer. I mean, everything, like the surgeries, the chemo, the hospitalization, everything. So I feel like I was very free in that regard. I'd already put so much out there that it was really very comfortable for me to just write some more into a script now. It was just channeling it in a different way. But you know, there's always parts that are a little touchy, like there's bits about her relationship, and there's bits about her family that are in there too. And there is fact that's mixed in with the parts that we fictionalized, but I think those might have been the areas where it was a little like, okay.
And you were talking about your mother and her response to seeing it for the first time.
Yeah, I showed a little sneaky copy to my mom, and pretty much the only thing she could focus on was the mom character. She was like, is that what you think of me? Is that how you see me? Nothing about me being in the film or, hey, I'm proud of you. It was just like, I don't talk like that. I don't dress like that. I didn't wear a cardigan. And she's like really going on and on about this. I know, I was like, did you see me in the film? Because I was in it too. That was great. Yeah. But for the most part, it's okay. You know, I don't feel like, I know there's always a very fine line when you're writing reality into something. I'm certainly not the first. So many authors have done it before me. But I think as long as it's not malicious what you're doing, you're just kind of writing what is and then embellishing it a little bit, I think that's okay. You know, hopefully for the most part, none of my family's gonna disown me, and yeah, it should be okay.
And Tom, when you're making your film, did you approach it as a comedy, or did you approach it as a documentary which was going to be a waltz-and-all look at life on the road and that sort of old-fashioned sort of format? So were you aware right from the start that your character, your personality, the way you wanted to present yourself would be integral to the way the film would come out?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I made these small little like vignettes on each band member, like early on in the tour, like I said, and I could post them online. Like I said, I wanted to give them more of a I wanted to make the national, just lighten the mood a little bit with these guys, and so yeah, I approached it that way. But as far as me being funny in it, and that kind of came out through people telling me that I might have a way or something that that you should definitely be in it more and try to get yourself on camera as much as possible. My friends would come, see me at shows and take the camera, and I'd just be doing my job, and things would happen, and I would forget to put the water bottles on stage or this or that, and obviously through editing, a lot of the comedy comes out, and I think my brother and I, even though I come from a background of loving sci-fi, horror, action movies, we always had an affinity, to the classic John Candy, John Hughes movies, and we knew that we could make, if we did it right, a kind of a heartwarming, triumphant tale, I guess. And we did. We definitely knew about a year ago that this could be really funny, but we didn't want to make it was hard because the footage was difficult to cut because I was just one camera. There was no coverage of anything, and so there's a lot of jump cuts, and we had to bend space and time, like and condense, like there's any movie does. You have to with docs, you just have to certain venues aren't the venues that are at, but it was really difficult. But the comedy came out through the editing for the most part, yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, you're all about families. I mean, families are at the core. This is kind of yourself, but actually, it's the way that you picture your family and what comes out of it. I mean, for you, Amy, it's a tough subject, as you said before. I mean, it's not an easy subject, and it's one which is covered, and it's a hard one. But you managed to find moments of joy in the film, the sequence of you dancing and sort of letting go. It must have been wonderful to actually sort of build in there, because that's about life coming back.
Yeah, and it's also about when you're going through it as well. I mean, I remember right after my first round of chemo, I got hospitalized for having no white blood cells. So you get put in basically an isolation room, and people come in spacesuits and and stick things in you. And so the day I got out, I was like, yes, this is awesome. And then as soon as I got home, I was like, I'm taking a shower in my own shower. And as I started brushing my hair, it was all coming out. At the time, it was quite long. And so I think this film kind of reflects how you have these roller coaster rides of emotion, because in that second, I was crying and I was upset. And then the next thing I knew, I was cutting out googly eyes, and I'd made a hair monster out of my hair. I was like, this is hysterical. And so, I don't know, I think it kind of showed that, yeah, I'm not making light of having cancer. It's obviously very heavy, and it's very serious, and it's something I hope nobody has to go through. But at the same time, you still have these moments in your life that are positive and where you feel very alive and joyous. And just walking around the city sometimes when I was going through the worst of it, I think was very therapeutic, because there's so much energy here, and you kind of can't help but feel really alive and vibrant. So I think the film reflects that a lot.
Absolutely, and Banco, I mean, your film, because it tackles not just your mother, it tackles generations. I mean, that must have been interesting in itself. And did your family find out more about itself as you had this process? Conversations which you don't often have, I presume, about relationships come up in very different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So Marian was, my grandmother again. I was really close with her. And starting this project, I learned so much about her that I didn't know. The film alludes to it. Actually, in a scene that's kind of fun also. But my mom's parents got divorced when she was quite young, and I always knew that. And I didn't know like all the details of what happened. And something about knowing that you're going to lose your memories, like I think that's the thing that made my mom want to write this book. And there are some pages that were completed, but more than that, there's hours and hours and hours and hours of me sitting with her and talking about all those things. And so I learned a lot about that. And that kind of like generational sharing was a really special part of production. And I think, but we also, the film reflects some lightness too. I like how you talked about that, because I talked about it as a film as wanting to show not my mom dying of the disease, but our whole family living with this disease, because it affects everybody. And the truth is that, every day is filled with all kinds of emotions all the time. But there's a lot of lightness and humor that's not written, but we just kind of live that too. And so I tried to share, like my mom became a grandmother 3 times over in the last 3.5 years, and just tried to make sure that the film was not just about this disease, but what it was like for us. And trying to find kind of humor and lightness is a big part of how you live with that.
It's actually very uplifting. The sequences with her friends, especially when they're singing together and their friends talking about their relationship, it's very moving, very uplifting at the same time. And did you have to leave a lot out? I mean, did you shoot an awful lot, or were there people who were on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, I shot probably over 200 hours, but then everything became like material. And my dad just filmed, so all the VHS tapes came back out, and I don't even know if we did a log on how much it would be, but and then all the Super 8, and then Marian also filmed at 8mm, and so the hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage. It's funny what you said about your mom too, because my dad, the one thing that came up, not just with me, but at the Q&A, he was obsessed with the fact he lost his temper a couple times, and people think one of them's funny, one of them's not. And so when he got up in front of a crowd, he wanted to kind of like call me out. He was like, "I don't swear that much, I can't believe you put it in the film twice, because it rarely happens." But it is really interesting to go through a process like this, hundreds and hundreds of hours, and wind up with a 80-minute document of your life. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the cutting floor.
And Tom, what was the experience like of having filming such a well-known band? I mean, were there parameters said, no, you mustn't go beyond here, you mustn't pull the wall down and film here? I mean, were they twitching about it, or did they just give you carte blanche?
They gave me whatever I really wanted to do. I mean, that's the reason why I started filming myself, knowing that I might be part of the movie, because I have special access. It's like I knew the guys. They would come in Cincinnati, and I, sometimes come up here to visit them, and so I knew that I could have a interesting angle. And I'm not a big, indie rock is not my favorite type of music, and so I knew that was also an interesting angle. But I didn't want to make a strict rock doc, because there's better people out there. There's actually bigger fans of bands to do that, and probably would do a better job at that than I am. And I just felt I had to ask the questions that I wanted to ask, and everybody brings up now what's called the wallet question, where I ask, do you wear your ID on stage? Do you have your ID on? You're this movie star. I mean, these are the questions I always want. Does Russell Crowe have his ID in his back pocket when he's playing characters? And so these are the kind of questions that I got to ask a famous person that I felt very comfortable with. And But they, I did. I also asked them, okay, there are some things that are not in the movie, but I certainly went too far about asking them about who, like, with there's two twins in the band, and I feel as though, like, who do they think is the more handsome one, and who did, and I would say, well, like, I find after your brother much more handsome, classically handsome than you, and hello? Sorry. But they totally were willing, and for a little bit, the movie took from day one of tour all the way to like 3 weeks ago, almost, before we finished cutting, it took 3 years. And they were willing to still wait and wait and wait and wait and to finally see it. And they saw it before the screening, but they were totally cool. And I just want to bring up about how you added humor. It was like, I think with my movie, there's what I thought was funny when I was filming myself, wasted on the bus or whatever, was actually very sad when you kind of look at it. And like any really, really good movie, any good movies have both.